Welcome to the Haven Collective. I'm J.R. Foresteros, and this is the Beacon Bit. Pastor Sonia was supposed to do this Beacon Bit, but she has been ill, and so I am subbing in. I'm going to be presenting her teaching. So she tells some stories in here and things like that. So I'm going to be telling her stories, and I'll do my best to make sure that it's clear that I am speaking on behalf of Sonia, not sharing my own personal story. So heads up on that. By the way, today we're exploring Matthew 26, 14 through 27, and verse 66. This is Palm Sunday, the beginning of Holy Week. Sonia lives out in Virginia, and the last major snowstorm that swept through that part of the country caused a lot of panic, as they tend to do, right? There was a bit of frenzy where she lives. She lives in the DMV area, which includes District of Columbia, Northern Virginia, and Maryland. The news showed frenzy of people getting ready for the storm, where it caused empty shelves at the grocery store, long lines at the gas stations. Not surprisingly, all the toilet paper, bottled water, eggs, fresh meat like steak and chicken, all were sold out. Her son was worried with how people were buying in this frenzied way, and he wondered if buying out all the fresh meat was a good idea, since there might be a power outage, and then what do you do with all that fresh meat, right? So she explained to him it's better, obviously, not to buy fresh stuff, but to buy dry goods to prepare for a power outage. And it's difficult to persuade people to get enough of that, and also to make sure that there's enough for the rest of the community. So they got their weekly supplies and went home, and she wasn't worried about the storm, since she grew up in an area where there were major storms her whole life, and she was raised to be prepared ahead of time. When she was growing up, preparation looked a lot different. She began with collecting the harvest of the fruits and vegetables, preparing it for storage to last the winter. They had to collect firewood to last the winter, complete repairs on the house and on the livestock corrals. And if you didn't prepare enough ahead of time, when winter began, you were affected. So she carried that idea of preparation forward into her life as she got older. She has safety equipment and gear in her vehicle. She buys a little extra food and supplies just in case of water, electrical, or gas outages. And of course, when COVID hit, that came in handy, because she had enough not only for herself and her family, but to share with others who were unable to find supplies. It's nice to be prepared, to not feel like you have to hoard all of the resources when other people in your community don't have any. I think we saw the negative effect of that during COVID, when toilet paper and hand sanitizer and things like that were being sold for way more than their usual daily cost. There are plenty of ways to prepare for changing seasons, emergencies, and even preparing for the week, right? That's really what the Christian calendar is all about. Seasons like Advent or Lent, or even the Sabbath day, which we celebrate on Sunday as Christians. Many of us have been participating in a Lenten fast, which is a way of preparing for Easter. It's a spiritual kind of preparation. Lent is a preparation journey that we take with Jesus to the cross. It's a time when we examine ourselves and reflect on what it looks like to live best in faith. So we discern how we need to change our lives and what we need so that we can be faithful followers. So Matthew 26 tells of Jesus' preparation for the first day of the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, which is Passover. Jesus directs his disciples to prepare at a certain man's house in the city. And we have to remember that Passover was a celebration of the people of Israel being liberated from enslavement in Egypt, and then their journey through the wilderness. It was so in Passover, not making rising bread, not making bread with yeast in it, was a symbol of leaving behind the negative influences of Egypt. The unleavened bread symbolizes the bread of life, God being with the people through their 40 years in the desert. And so one customary preparation that Jewish people do even to this day is clean their homes to remove any leavening ingredients like yeast. Leavening agents are a way of representing sin, and so then by removing them from the house, you're removing sin and the negative influence of sin. And it was, again, a preparation. It was something you did ahead of the festival to get ready. The festival lasted 7 days, so you wanted to make sure that you were prepared in order to be able to celebrate all 7 days. The Feast of the Unleavened Bread begins with preparation. And so Matthew brings our attention to the way Jesus was preparing for the feast and how he was going to share it among his kinfolk, his disciples that were functioning very much like his family. The ceremonial meal was a way for Israel to remember their exit from Egypt, and it really did parallel what they were experiencing in Jesus' day under Roman rule. Rome didn't technically enslave them, they were occupying them, colonizing them, right? But they oppressed them with heavy taxation, systemic exploitation, which resulted in economic distress, unjust legal systems, poverty, lack, scarcity. Roman military occupation created violence and brutality, and the colonial government carefully monitored the Jews during these religious observances. And they were quick to stamp out any whiff of riots or uprisings. Crucifixions were not uncommon because they were, again, a way of Rome expressing their control. So when the Jewish people observe a ceremony that promises deliverance from oppression, bringing about hope of a new world where, good overcomes evil, this isn't like the best holiday for Rome to experience as the oppressor, right? So Passover made Rome nervous, and I think it's worth asking as we enter Holy Week if our observation of Lent makes the powers of our day nervous. Right? What does it look like for us to collectively prepare for and celebrate a feast, Easter, that promises that all people, the whole world, is given life and no longer sentenced to death? That it's something for everyone, not just for those on thrones. I think just like the people of Israel, this season of Lent signifies our journey into the wilderness and the entry into the promised land, something that we have been reflecting on throughout this series and last series. The changing of the bread from leavened to unleavened demonstrates that God no longer supplies manna in the wilderness. God creating a promised land that allows us to grow, produce, distribute the earth's resources. God calls us to be stewards of the promised land and to share the abundant life of land, produce, and capital by practicing hospitality and care of the earth's source of life. The economy of God is care and hospitality to make certain that the produce, land, and capital all belong to all of God's people and places us in service to all creatures. The world of God is completely different to the world that we live in. Matthew's consistently connecting the opponents and those who lead the oppression of Jesus' ministry to those who are responsible for his death, right? These are the people who were more comfortable with Rome's leadership. And so there's this long list of people throughout Holy Week who don't want to embrace the good news that Jesus is offering and come to the conclusion that this movement that Jesus is leading, where one gives up one's life for their neighbor, is not what they signed up for. The person who chooses not to care for the least of these, to harm the poor, the most vulnerable, the oppressed, the marginalized. This alternative world, this promised land, is the site that takes us back to Jesus' life-giving death. It's the one that's brought Jesus' followers hope and perspective. Matthew connects gracious and kind act towards neighbors and the least of these as persons wanting to honor Jesus as the Messiah. And so we come to understand the importance of hospitality to care for our neighbors by redistributing our resources and the produce of the land that belongs to all. Jesus invites us to the table, right? The Passover table that becomes the communion table, where Jesus offers his own bread as body as bread and blood as wine. Jesus is the redemptive sacrifice that brings us to enter the eternal promised land that God has promised and makes us restored people of God. This promised land brings Jesus' followers to the renewed fellowship and new life of the promised land. We spend Epiphany in the wilderness considering what it looks like to be faithful in the face of cruelty and oppression, particularly of this administration that we're living under. In Lent, we'd be considering what it looks like to walk away from those systems, even when they might benefit us as individuals. Now, as we enter Holy Week, I wonder what it looks like for us to consider how these preparations make us dangerous, not because we're leaning towards violence, but because we're choosing to notice and care for those who are being trampled. Look forward to discussing this in our Beacon Bits this week. Would you pray for Pastor Sonia as she is healing? Until Sunday, grace and peace go with you.